I'm using, in this case, I ended up using some of the tapestry needles. There was a question of how do you use the tapestry needles? And what I did in order to use the tapestry needles, here I've run out of blue, so this is a perfect transition time. Here's one of my tapestry needles. Here's my blue ball. I'm going to wind off something. Usually I don't like to wind off anything that's more, you can't really see this very well, but anything that's more than twice the length of my arm. The reason is it has to do with, at some point, I'll be just pulling out lots and lots of yarn if I'm doing it with the tapestry needle. There's a pair of scissors, so I cut this. So I'm going to, tapestry needles are pretty easy to thread because there's a really big eye, which is very convenient because our yarn is a bit thicker. And now I'm going to, I have the yarn inside of my tapestry needle, and I'm going to pull that one end down. So they're not quite at the same length, but they're sort of close to the same length pulled from the needle. And now there was a question of how do I smoothly transition when I have finished a yarn rather than knotting it. So to do this, and I'm just pausing to see if I can find a box to put this up on so you can see me a little bit closer to the camera. This raises it a tiny bit. Is that I'm going to go ahead and weave this in. Like this was, oops, sorry, I actually need to do my yellow line first, because in this case, what I've got going on is I've got a yellow, blue alternating on this side. And then over here, I've got just red gradually coming in. And Maddie, this might slightly answer your question, but I'm gonna play around with a few different things, and I can show you the raya knots again. All right, so on this end, I need to do my yellow. I'm going to use my tapestry needle to do that. And I'm doing opposite. I'm pulling, I have the blue and the yellow interlaced on the edge. And now I'm pulling it, but I'm not pulling it so tight that it wants to pull in my selvage. That's the edge of my weaving, is called the selvage. And you can see over here that it's more or less even. It is pulling a little bit in, so I do need to be a bit aware of that. But I'm keeping it kind of loose as I go across. So this needle, using the tapestry needle, is a lot like sewing, only faster. And I'm going to come all the way here to the edge. This is where I'm integrating something that is striped with a solid piece. And I'm basically just doing a, this is sort of like, this is one of the different kinds of tapestry techniques. In here, I'm going to be trying to answer Rachel's question. So Rachel, if we were looking at, and I know I'm kind of jumping between things, so I hope you all can follow me. And if it's too confusing, I can separate out things, but some questions will be answered together. So Rachel, if you looked on the tapestry technique sheet that I handed out, you were doing right here what is called a straight slit, so that your two different lines left a space in between. So we had one warp here, and your wefts on one side went around the one warp, and then your wefts on the other side went around on that other warp. And that's why you have a slit there. So in some weavings, this would be actually like a feature and not a problem. But if you want to have them meet, it would need to do something like here is an interlocking, where the two wefts interlock around each other. By the way, I have a cat who wants to be introduced at some point. And then, or it could be something where they interlock around a common warp, so that there is one warp thread and you do one row from the left, a row from the right, a row from the left, a row from the right, and they're going around the warp. Okay, so that's a couple of different ways. There's a few other things in here, like you could have something that is irregular going around a common warp, or even more irregular, depending on how you wanted them to be integrated. All right, so I'm coming back to here. I'm going from my stripes that I have here to a solid area. So I'm being conscientious as I come over here, and my red has been sort of jumping further and further along as I go. I'm going to do my yellow here, and in order to make sure that my selvage doesn't completely pull in, like if I pull this tightly, I would be ending up putting a lot more pressure over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use what is sort of like a bubble method, where you can see that this is the selvage side, and I'm kind of making a hill with my weft, so that as I beat it down with my fork, it has enough weft that it's not pulling in on the edge there. So I hope that that answers people's questions, because that's mainly what's going on. And Elle, it's a little bit similar to what you had, only you have a narrow piece that you're trying to weave in together. That is pulling. So the way that I've been doing this weaving is that I will do, because it's every other one with the blue and the yellow, it's a little bit of a puzzle to put these together. So I've done one color, one row of the yellow or blue, and then I do a complete back and forth of the red. So here I'm, in this, for this one that I'm doing, I am using a common warp thread. So the yellow and the red are both going around the same warp thread. And you can see if I had lots and lots of yarn on my my tapestry needle right now, I would just keep pulling and pulling and pulling. So that's why I limit it to length twice of my arm. Now here, because I'm ready for doing the blue, I am going to show you the transition. So I have a little bit of blue left. I don't mind for my weaving if the back side has lots of little pieces, but the front side, I want to choose whether or not I have things coming off the front. So here I'm going to begin my weaving in of my blue, this little tail. Okay, so the tail is now on the back side of my weaving. And now I'm going to come in with my, oops, my tapestry needle blue, and I'm going to overlap maybe an inch of the weaving here. So you can see, I'll try to do this a little bit further up close. I'm going to come under here, over, under, just doing the exact same thing as that blue, the other blue I was doing. And then I can keep going. And as I pull this now, here's the tail of that new blue. Oops, I can see that I need to help it get, hi Max. That's my cat. I can pull that tail down below. So now we've got about an inch right here where they are overlapping each other. And so it will sort of seamlessly be integrated. Yes, it's doubled up briefly there, but that will, once it's compacted in, it won't really be that visible. Now, Marissa had the question of how do I integrate a new material into this? Like if I wanted to stop my blue and then I wanted to start a new material. I want to show you all, and then also Jessie had the question of how do I get my my spots on here if I wanted some spots. And I think that there's a couple different ways you could go about that. So here, just while we're at here, I'm gonna want my blue to also go around this common warp thread. So I'm just getting that prepared. It's gone around the one common warp thread. Wait a minute, excuse me, that's actually not correct. It needs to wait. I need to do the red. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure that the blue goes around the yellow, and that's how the blue is gonna be kept there. But I do my red. And actually I'm feeling like the red could start start moving even further over. So maybe I will just go around that blue area. Okay. And then I can go back with my yellow. It's a little bit complex when you've got so many different threads because you've got a pattern going on and you have a non-pattern. Now, if I were to jump this, I'm going to have a piece of the yarn sitting down right in front. So instead, I'm going to go inside here. And actually what I need to do is that should go, this yellow is going to need to go under and then over that one. And so I'm basically just sort of sewing it in place so that it's not sitting on top as much. You may be finding like there's some people had questions that maybe now seeing me use the tapestry needle, that you are probably answering some of your own questions. So like Sunjana, I'm thinking about your question about how do I fill in when I've got something loose, but I want to add in more back at an earlier spot. So one way I can do that is using this tapestry needle. So for instance, let's say that this was more separated here. And I want like this to be a red eye or something. Like I want to go back into there. One thing I can do is I can take my red on my tapestry needle and I can just integrate right inside of there. So I will need to go over, under, over, under, over, under. This is much easier than trying to take like the whole ball of yarn into there. And again, I have my tail left, so I'm going to hand weave in my tail. Around a few of these. I'm doing it now before I get too much else inside of there. Now, one thing that this is going to do is you can probably see that it's offsetting some of my warp. So my warp is almost going in a few different directions all of a sudden. Or sorry, not warp, my weft. You can see how this part of my weft is kind of making a hill, and it's going to make a hill around the red that I'm adding in. And personally, I like that. I like the fact that it is going in multiple directions and that it's going to have this part that has some motion. Some of you may have already found that like you can use it to go around something. So I think that if you're willing to have that element, which is a kind of natural part of doing some of this tapestry work, is to have the lines get to go in some different directionalities, and that you can use that to add to have the feeling of movement, that can also help with integrating things in places where you feel like you want to integrate something, but you're a little bit worried about how it's going to feel. Okay, so let's say that, I mean, I could sit here and fill in this whole eye gap in this, I guess I'm calling it an eye for it. I guess it reminds me of a shape of an eye, but that's going to take me a while. And I think that you all probably would prefer seeing more varied techniques than watching me fill in this entire hole here. So I'm going to do that. And you all notice I'm trying to be very careful again on the selvage, keeping it loose enough, and that it's okay if it's not so taut going across, like not taut like that tight, and that I can keep it looser so that it looks like the weft is actually flowing around the warp. All right, so I'm gonna weave this tail in just a little bit so that as I finish it, the tail is underneath. So I'm doing that partway through, pulling it out the back rather than the front. And now I can actually re-scrunch these down. And then I'm gonna trim out the back. Okay, so hopefully, Sunjana, that helped give you some ideas of things that you can do using the tapestry needle in order to be able to add things in. So similarly, I could decide, someone asked me if I would show them the raya knots. I'm gonna use more of my red to do that. The raya knots, again, I wanna cut some yarns that are of similar length. Actually, I'm gonna show you a different technique for making bubbles that will, I think ultimately, I'll be adding a new technique, plus I will be actually having to introduce something at the same time. So here, I'm gonna make right here a bunch of curly cues that are out of the red material. And this one's a little bit of a different technique. So here I'm using a pencil. You could use anything that you want to use. And I'm going to start, I want my tail again to be in the back. So I'm actually gonna just start kind of in the middle. I'm going along the same as what the yellow was, just to have this in somewhere. And then when I come across the other way, here, and I'll just show you, this is the area that I want to use. When I come across the other way, then it's just in there nice and nicely, and I don't have to worry about it later. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to make my area be about this length. Again, I'm being conscientious about how much I'm pulling on the warp threads. If it's really kind of bubbly like that, I might pull it a little bit, but it's okay for me if it's kind of loose. All right, So I have a pencil here, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to come back, and every time I come up, I'm actually going to also go around the pencil. And I'm right-handed, so I'm going to sort of move this a little bit and put this down a little bit so that I don't feel quite so cramped. All right. So pencil, I'm putting this around the pencil, and then I'm going up and under. It's going around the pencil. Here, if I put it here, you can kind of see where it needs to go. So I'm going around the pencil every time that it comes up. Oh shoot, sorry people. So it's around the pencil, down and up again, around the pencil. I'm going under the threads that I still need to go under, but the other ones I am going up and over the pencil. I wonder if you all can see that well enough. And I am pulling it taut on here, but I'm pulling it taut mostly because I have this pencil here. And the pencil allows that I'm not actually putting any kind of extra stress on the actual warp threads. So I'm at the end of where I was, my red section. So the next line across, and I'm turning it back its original way, is just going to be a regular up and down, because that is going to hold in place what I'm about to, when I pull out the pencil. I can beat that down. And now when I pull out the pencil, it leaves, I don't know if you can see that, but it leaves some curly cues. Maybe if I did that part in white, you would see it a little bit easier. Yes, did somebody have a question?
Yeah. So if you do that with more than one thread, will it sort of like not leave any space in between, so it just looks like a whole bunch of loops jumbled up together?
Like if you do rows of them, or if you do like, if I were to take like 3 strands at once.
3 strands at once.
I definitely think that taking more strands is going to make it more dense, and then the more rows you do, also the more dense.
Okay. Thank you.
So, yeah, of course. So I'll do 1 or 2 more rows of that so that you can sort of see where it's going. And I'm going to keep the red involved, and I'm going to take the yellow off of its needle at this moment. Okay. Just again doing this here so that I have a little bit of, okay, right. There's one other way that I've seen this done. So this, I can be doing it this way. The other way that I could set this up is that I could actually weave all the way across, as I have been, keep it very loose, and then come back with my pencil and actually just pick it up, so that I now pick up there, pick it up here, pick it up there. So all of these that is when it's floating above the warp, I'm picking it up and wrapping it on the pencil. There it's above the warp, picking it up, wrapping it around the pencil. It's a little bit of a faster way to do this. Okay, so now I have my pencil in there, and now I'm going to come back across with a regular row, a sort of plain weave row, and this time I'm going to just use red for that. Then you'll sort of be seeing a difference. Keeping it again somewhat loose so that when I pack it in, it's not pulling on the warp threads. And now I can pull out that white row, and it keeps the loops. Maybe you can see the loops a little bit better. Now we've got 2 rows of loops. And then if we look directly on top, I've got a row of the white loops, and then following it is just a row of red plain weave. And then I would do another row of loops, a row of plain weave. Do it one more time. Okay, keeping this loose, and then coming back around, and everywhere that it's going above the warp, I'm pulling it, and I'm pulling from the extra part of the weft rather than from the part, so it doesn't strain the warp. Okay, now I do want to pull this one tight, because when I let it go, and then I'm going to come across with my red. Oh my, is it already 2:52? It is. Okay, so I need to switch gears and show you the slideshow. To answer a few of the other questions, yeah, there were a few questions that I did want to still answer. And if this is not packing in, you could do 2 rows of plain weave, and that would actually pack it in stronger, because it would cause a sort of much more of a tighter compression down here. Jesse, your question of how to get your animal spots, I would say that your animal spots, you could either do like we did here, where you come back and kind of stitch it in by separating out something after you have woven the other rows, or stitch it in at the end. I think that if you were doing it in a sort of tapestry format where you had 3 colors going all at once, that would end up being pretty challenging to be doing throughout, and that it would be easier to put in colors, and you could even have like a color gradation, or you could do something as for the background part and then come back and put the spots on. Okay. And then I know that I'm not, Jasmine, I know that I did not get to something I wanted to show you. And the question of introducing new materials. I would say that just introduce materials, but what you may end up doing is like here, what I was planning on doing on this section, Marissa, this is to answer your question, is that I was going to build this up for a while, and then I was going to start taking another thread and just going over the entire thing. So it was like a hill, and then I might fill in certain areas. So it's okay if it starts to get bulky where the new material is. Maybe it could sort of be something like grows in that area, grows out of something else. You could kind of think about it as that the new material is having more density. How is it pushing around, or how are they literally negotiating the space? And it's okay if it exhibits like that part of that negotiation. I hope that was helpful, people.